We did it. We did it. It's Larry Elder. And yes, Todd Saylor, The Wire Differently. Our show is on. It's on like Donkey Kong. Let it rip, potato chip. Larry, say hello to all the people.
Boom shakalaka laka. Boom shakalaka.
Boom shakalaka is the word of the day. Let's get it on like Donkey Kong.
Preview.
Todd is not only a remarkable, successful 30-year titan in business with having multiple businesses that generate multiplied millions of dollars.
And if that plan happens to be to build $1 million company, which I can help you do.
But he's humble. He's a man of God. He's a family man.
The world's news organizations are built on everything but positivity.
He is an influential entrepreneur and business speaker for over 30 years.
I've got to forecast. I've got to pronounce. I've got to project. I've got to share with you my ideas, my vision, my goals for not only myself, but for you.
That's why he's came up with his incredible concept of taking and creating a platform for people that are wired differently.
And you got to understand that your habits of your person and your habits of your business and your habits of your spirituality have to lead to the North Star of who you are. We need to figure out who we want to be in life.
Boom shakalaka laka boom. I love, you know what? No one has ever came on the show to boom shakalaka. What in the world's going on, Larry Elder?
Well, how are you? I really appreciate your having me on. I just am so grateful to be on platforms like yours. We have enough time to really talk about stuff. You know, I'm in talk radio, been in talk radio for almost 40 years and TV, and you speak in sound bites. To have long form podcasts like yours is just a delight. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you're the king, and I've watched you for quite some time. I was teasing you about Phona Bro and some of the stuff that I got to watch, and so I'm learning this game. You know, I'm the modern day Apollos. I write about it in my books.
Todd, correction. Elvis is the king. Come on,
Elvis.
Elvis is the king, man.
Thank you very much. I get the king confused with Sebastian Gorka sometimes, but you are the king. So anyways, you've been doing it a long time, and it's a privilege to have you on the show. But I just kind of wanted to take you through some of this stuff. You know, we on this show, I'm America's functional coach, right? Like, so I want to teach people, Larry, how to grow themselves personally. I want to teach people how to grow themselves spiritually, and I want to be able to teach them to grow them profitably. And so as the show has grown and the interviews have grown, I've been able to reach out to the Salem people and a lot of people out in the conservative network that have been able to be very honest, open, and brutal about the way the world is right now. And when I think about you, I'm inspired. And I did a whole show this morning about you. Were your ears burning?
They were.
They were a little bit. Well, anyway, it was good. And I titled it Counterculture. And I want to tie in the spiritual side real quick here, because then I'm going to give you your first question. But the spiritual side is this counterculture. I likened the plight or the challenge that you have, along with a group of people that you're really working hard at this and trying to make people understand there's two sides to every story, right? And counterculture is something that Christ really came to this earth to do with and for us, to take on the mainstream, to take on the world and say, hey, man, this is the way it is now. It's not going to be easy. And you Christians, you people that love me and choose to choose me, right, are going to be somewhat persecuted. You're going to be maligned, and you're going to be talked about, and you're going to be forced to make decisions or say things or pick a side that you're not normally comfortable doing. And so when I look at you and I think about you and I see what you do, I think counterculture. What a beautiful person. And we looked up and we talked about Colossians 4:6. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. And when I talked about you this morning, I'm like, Larry Elder, he is salty, right? He has got a little salt. But the better piece I talked about was this. You have an answer for everyone. Now, I don't mean that it's always right, but you're in a position, you're in a posture to be able to deliver something in regards to your counterculture. So my first question, you ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. What has made you wired differently? You're clearly wired differently. You're a countercultural phenomenon.
Well, very interesting to say it's countercultural, and I don't think it's an inaccurate way of looking at it. I think it's sad. All I'm doing is telling the truth. Malcolm X said, "I'm for the truth, no matter who's telling it." Harry Truman, give him hell. Harry said, "All I do is tell them the truth. They think it's hell." But to answer your question, my inspiration by far and away are my mother and my father. My mother and my father always told us hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan or groan about what somebody did or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, they told me, no matter how good you are, how hard you work, sooner or later, bad things are going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell us if we raised a man. That is the attitude that I grew up with from my mother and my father, and which is why I've written so extensively about the importance of having a father in the home married to the mother. I've got a book coming out, as you know, Todd, tomorrow, called As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation. And in it is a whole chapter to answer your very question about what makes Larry Elder, and talk extensively about my mother and my father, both of whom grew up in the Jim Crow South, saw racism when it was really institutional racism, yet they still had an attitude of hard work wins. My dad worked 2 full-time jobs cleaning toilets as I grew up. He left school when he was in the 8th grade, never finished high school, went to night school at night. I thought everybody's dad went to night school at night. And then after getting his GED, he went back to night school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. So fast forward, my dad starts a small restaurant at the age of 47, runs it until his 80s. And when my dad retired, he owned that property, the property next door, plus a little house that's still in our family, not too shabby for an 8th grade dropout. Jim Crow South, Athens, Georgia, at the beginning of the Great Depression when he was kicked out of his house by his irresponsible, illiterate mother. My mother grew up on a farm and told my brothers and me, nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. And they all emphasized hard work and education, hard work and education. Oh, and by the way, hard work and education.
Yeah. So I think the viewers need to be framed up a little bit here, because I think a lot of people know who you are. But Larry Elder, when I talk about him being counterculture, I want to frame that up for you just a little more, because we're going to move on to Salem Media and some of the things that you've done in the past and some of the friends that we know together. But most of you may know this and some of you may not know this. But when I say counterculture, Larry's in a position where he is pushing back, I think, the narrative that the left or the liberal media would want us to believe when it comes to Black culture, Black racism, the way a Black person looks at a white person in general. And I think that it's a very uncomfortable place to be for me. And I can't imagine, being a Larry Elder. When you talk about being a Christian and you're around Christians, you talk about Christian stuff all the time, and you don't have to feel like, hey, man, this Christian, that Christian. We generally have a place to find some common ground. But when we go out in the world and there's non-Christians out there, then we can bind together to that nature. But now when you talk about a Larry Elder and a Candace Owen and a Sergeant Brandon Tatum, when they start to talk about racist thoughts or Black culture, they're taking on some of the narrative that the left has pushed on the Black culture over time, and they're actually somewhat combative or colliding with their own team in some regards. And so when I say counterculture, and I mean that in the most respectful way, Larry, but I find it a bit uncomfortable, a bit troubling. And as a white person, I've grown up not knowing the Black culture, but basically when I was 18, I learned in college football, and I was about it, and I understood some of the plight. And so I can't be dispassionate to the story of roots. I can't be dispassionate to the story of racism. I cannot deny for one moment that there is racism still out there and still happening. But I do understand where you and Candace are coming from. I do understand where the both sides of this are. And for you to step up and say, okay, if we really want to solve this problem, like if we really want to get serious about this, let's look at it this way also. And so that's what I respect about you swimming upstream in the counterculture. So what I want to talk to you about, everybody understands that he's nationally famous. He's got a star on Hollywood Walk of Fame. You've made a couple movies. I think Jim Crow, what was that?
Uncle Tom 1, Uncle Tom 2. I executive produced.
With Brandon, correct?
Brandon starred in them, but it was directed by a guy named Justin Malone. He also co-wrote it and directed it. And it's a Malone film. So I helped to co-write it. I raised the money for Uncle Tom. And by the way, Uncle Tom 1 was not nominated for Best Documentary, even though it made more money than at least 4 of the 5 that were nominated combined. I said at least because one of them was a Netflix film, and they don't break out the box office receipts individually for the film. My suspicion is Uncle Tom made more money than all the 5 that were nominated for best documentary by the Academy Awards combined. We had a consultant to try to get them to consider us, and of course they wouldn't do it because our film is conservative, and it's all about the way Black people kept moving forward after slavery. Even though, as you know, Blacks were completely destitute, most of them. We're talking about KKK, Jim Crow South, yet Black people kept moving forward. In 1940, 87% of Blacks lived under the poverty line. 1960, that number had fallen to 47. It's a 40-point drop in 20 years, the greatest 20-year period of economic expansion in the history of Black America. Why? Because it was rare for a Black kid to enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, a strong belief in Judeo-Christian values, a belief in entrepreneurship, and a belief in patriotic values, even though America was not applying those values to Black people. Fast forward, we have an organization like Black Lives Matter, which we discussed in Uncle Tom 2, and every single thing that made Black people continue to march forward is under attack by organizations like Black Lives Matter, which unfortunately the bulk of Black people support. The founders are trained Marxists. Marx, of course, did not believe in God, wanted to dethrone God. Marx hated Jews. Marx did not believe in capitalism. And so every single thing that helped Black people go forward are under attack. Black Lives Matter, even on their website, attacked the nuclear family as a European construct, even though it was the foundation of Black America until the mid-60s when a Democrat named Lyndon Johnson launched a so-called war on poverty. And since then, the percentage of Blacks entering the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, has gone from 25% to 70%. Now 25% of white kids enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. And Todd, the numbers are clear. According to the Centers for Disease Control, if a kid is raised without a father, he's 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. We've incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon the financial and moral responsibility. And when I said all this to Charlemagne the God, as you know, he pushed back. So I had a few questions for him, and he couldn't answer them. The number one cause of preventable death for a white male 19 years and younger is accidents, like car accidents or drownings or drug overdoses. The number one cause of preventable death for a 19-year-old Black male and under is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young Black male. Blacks account for 60% of the robberies, the shootings, and the homicides in America. And according to the Centers for Disease Control, a Black male aged 10 to 43, Todd, is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a white male, same demo. Now, unless you're prepared to say Black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime, if it isn't the absence of a father in the home married to the mother, please tell me what it is. And he had nothing.
No, and you are famous as a closer. Like anything I study about you is you're a closer. You have more converts in this thought process than probably, if anybody was keeping score, than anybody in the world, right? So you brought up Charlemagne. Let's talk about Charlemagne a little bit because it's one of my all-time favorite videos. It's very uncomfortable for me, but I thought if I would show it because this is the counterculture. This is Black men talking about Black challenges in life, and one feels one way and one feels another way. And I just think that it's interesting that I titled this show The Black Face of White Supremacy. And this is the counterculture that we're dealing with when it comes to what Larry Elder faces. Let's watch.
Have you ever heard the term nigga wake up call?
No.
It is an incident where a person of color forgets that they are of color and are reminded rather brutally by an unexpected act of racism. Have you ever had any of those?
Oh, brother.
I'm just asking. You think you've ever
Well,
had
I'm acutely aware, Charlemagne, that I'm a Black person, just as you are a Black person. And when Joe Biden insulted you by saying, you ain't really Black, we don't know whether or not you want to vote for me or vote for Donald Trump, it seems to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part. How dare this guy come in here and insult you, a Black man, and tell you you got to think a certain kind of way? I'm amazed that you weren't mad about that.
I'm not gonna say it upset me, just like I'm not letting you upset me. You know what I mean? I don't tend to get upset over things like that. But what I did say,
well, you just not talk about a nigger wake-up call, and it seemed to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part to have a white guy come in here who also said, by the way, about Mitt Romney, because he didn't want to put more regulations on Wall Street, going to put y'all back in chains. And Joe Biden has lied for decades about his civil rights record, claiming that he desegregated movie theaters and restaurants in Wilmington, Delaware, when he didn't do any of that. He lied and said that he tried to visit Nelson Mandela during apartheid South Africa. He did not. And he came in here and told you aren't even black unless you think a certain kind of way. It seems to me that should have been a nigga wake-up call for you, but it wasn't, apparently.
Yeah, I mean,
Pretty clear. Like, so if anybody else is uncomfortable, I mean, I think you have every right to be uncomfortable. You know, there's words being said that we're not supposed to say, and there's conversations between two men that are respectable in their industries. But here I am watching this stuff, trying to figure out where do we fit. So I want to just kind of show that, because I want everyone to understand what I'm talking about, counterculture. I want everyone to understand like an average day for you, right? Defending your thought, right? Your process. Go ahead.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I want to congratulate Charlemagne the God for having me on.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get on his show for a long time. And I called him out one time. He never had me on. And when people tell me how courageous I was for going on a show, I have to be invited. I'd love to be on The View. I'd love to be on the morning show on NBC, CBS, ABC. I'd love to be. You can't just show up. You have to be invited. He invited me on a show. A lot of black liberals and other liberals do not do that. And so I want to congratulate him for having me on the show. Secondly, I know I changed him, because after I was on his show, guess who we came out to support for president? Nikki Haley. And since then, he's been saying a lot of commonsensical kinds of things. So I know I got him to rethink his assumptions. I think there was something like 60,000 individual comments on this exchange he and I had. Almost 2 million people have now seen it. And I haven't read all of them. One of my friends read every single one of the comments. And 85% of them were pro Larry Elder. And many of them told Charlemagne the God he needed to wake up and smell the facts. So I want to thank him for having me on. But regarding Joe Biden, Todd, he does what Democrats always do, and that is to play the race card, wave it around in front of black people to get them to go into that voting booth like lemmings and pull that lever 90% or so for the Democratic Party, as blacks have recently. For example, about 2 or 3 months ago, Joe Biden is at Howard University, a historically black college, giving a commencement address. And he said the number one threat to the homeland was, wait for it, white supremacy. Are you kidding me? According to the Anti-Defamation League, last year there were around 25 people who were killed by political extremists, and not all of them are white, by the way, out of the over 20,000 homicide victims. So it's a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket. You want to play that game, though? Let's play that game. Most homicides are same race homicide. Most whites who are killed by other whites. Most blacks who are killed or murdered by other blacks. However, every year, Todd, there are around 750 interracial black-white homicides, a little under 3% of the total. So a small percentage, but 750. 500 white people are killed by blacks, even though blacks are just 13% of the population. 250 whites are killed by blacks. 250 blacks are killed by whites, even though whites are 60% of the population. Now, if Donald Trump gave a commencement exercise at a conservative college and said the number one threat to the homeland was black supremacy, you and I would rightly denounce him as a race-hustling demagogue. And forget about homicides. Let's talk about violent crime between blacks and whites. Every single year, there are roughly 600,000 such instances. And by non-homicide violent crime, I'm talking about attempted murder, attempted manslaughter, rape, assault with an aggravated weapon. 85 to 90% is a black perp white victim, only about 10 or 15% the other way around. Now, again, if Donald Trump mentioned those stats and said we should be fearing black supremacy, he would be derided as a demagogue, a racist. Yet Biden goes on Howard University, says this, and nobody says a word. It is absolutely outrageous, and we let it go.
But doesn't that entire dialogue between Charlemagne and Biden and the whole thing, like, isn't Biden a racist? I mean, I don't where you sit on that whole prospect of what he's done, his history, and the fact that he says that, and he's talking to a guy with the name of Charlemagne the God. I mean, I got a hard time with the name Charlemagne the God, and then I got to go over here and I got to deal with Biden the God. And so where is Biden a racist?
I used to call Al Sharpton America's biggest race card hustler, but now it's Joe Biden. Joe Biden, for decades, Todd, as I was telling Charlemagne the God, has lied, claiming that he, when he was a teenager, went to the black church and strategized how to desegregate movie theaters and restaurants in Delaware. New York Times did a big study on this, and there's zero evidence he ever did any of it. And the New York Times said his aides gently told Joe Biden that there was no evidence he did this and to please stop saying it. But Biden kept saying it anyway. Biden said he was raised in the black church. Well, they went to the church in question, and the people at the church said they never saw him. Biden claimed that he was arrested trying to visit Nelson Mandela during apartheid South Africa when Mandela was in jail. No evidence of it whatsoever. And Biden, as I mentioned to him, when he was talking about Mitt Romney refusing to push for more regulation on Wall Street, Biden giving a speech before a black audience and said Mitt Romney wants to unchain Wall Street, wants to put y'all back in.
Put y'all in chains. And
My point is, Biden
Hillary had hot sauce in her purse.
Biden played the race card over and over and again for decades to manipulate black people into thinking somehow he's some sort of warrior for the black cause when he flat out lied and lied repeatedly. And yet here he is, this guy that goes to Howard University and stands up there like he's the great white savior. It's insulting. It is demeaning. And Charlemagne the God allowed him to get away with it.
Why do we got to call him Charlemagne? I'm not calling him Charlemagne the God. I'm just not, just want you to know, I'm dropping that piece of it. So listen, we're on the presidential thing real quick, and I don't want to make a transition. You ran for, you put your name in the hat to be 2024, the president of the United States. Are you crazy? Why would you do that? I want to know why you did it, and then I want to know why you got out.
And Todd, crazier still, even before that, in 2021, I ran in the recall election.
Oh, I was going to get there. You ruined. Come on, give me some credit, babe. All right, let's go. Why did you run for president? And then let's talk about Gavin Newsom.
Well, I ran for president as a mega guy. And you might ask, why run as a mega guy? When we got a mega guy running, his name is Donald Trump. And the answer is, even Donald Trump, as much admiration as I had for him, was not talking about the number one domestic problem in America, which again is the epidemic of fatherlessness. It's not just 70% of black kids who enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. It's 50% of white kids. As I mentioned, 50% of Hispanic kids, 25% of white kids, 40% of all Americans now enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, and nobody's talking about it. Their side doesn't do it because, as I mentioned, Lyndon Johnson caused it. Our side doesn't do it for fear. If you're white and you say it, you'll be accused of engaging in institutional racism. And if you're black, you'll be accused, as I was of the LA Times, by being the black face of white supremacy. The other thing is this. While our side does talk about school choice, and Donald Trump had a education secretary, Betsy DeVos, who was a strong advocate of school choice, we have still not made the case of how bad things are in urban America in our government schools K through 12. Just to pick two cities, Baltimore, 13 public high schools in Baltimore, Todd, all located in the inner city. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Chicago, 53 government schools, all located in the inner city. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Now, I can't think of anything more destructive to your future than not being able to read and write and do math at grade level in our digital age than to go to a school where this kind of thing is going on. We don't talk about it enough. Meanwhile, the party elites, whether it's Gavin Newsom or Barack Obama or Joe Biden, have their own kids in private school. And also there's this lie that America remains systemically racist. It's not only dividing the country, it's not only getting black people angry so they pull that lever for the Democratic Party at a tune of around 90%. It's getting people killed. It's called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. And that's a phenomenon, Todd, of cops pulling back all over the country, New York, LA, Chicago, for fear of being accused of engaging in systemic racism. So they're no longer engaging in proactive policing. Crime up, arrests down. And as a result, there are thousands of people who are now dead in the last few years who would be alive if the police had been doing their normal.
What do you call that again, Larry? I wanted to write that one. People should be understand. What do you call that effect again?
The Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. Yep. And that's a phenomenon of cops pulling back from proactive policing. When crime goes up, you expect arrests to go up. Right. In fact, the opposite is happening. Crime is going up, but arrests are going down because cops are they're not longer proactive. What I mean by that is I have a lot of friends who are cops. And they're driving around, they see something that looks suspicious, they can get out of the squad car and walk over and wade into it and find out what's going on. Someone's going to hold up a cell phone, take it out of context, put it on YouTube. Next thing you know, the cop is accused of engaging in racism. So what they do is answer radio calls. So no more proactive policing, arrests are down, bad guys know the chances of them being caught are down, being convicted are down, being incarcerated are down. They may be criminals, but they're not stupid. And that's what's going on. And so there are thousands of what I call excess casualties or excess deaths that have taken place in the last several years in America, almost all in the inner city, almost all black and brown people, the very people on the left that the Democrats purport to care about. So those are the kinds of issues that I've been talking about in Iowa, New Hampshire, when I was on the campaign trail. And I've now noticed that even Vivek mentioned the epidemic of fatherlessness. He had never done it before. And a left-wing columnist with the New York Times named Nicholas Kristof wrote a big piece a few weeks ago about the epidemic of fatherlessness, criticized liberals for not paying attention to the issue, and even said it was counterproductive, his word, not mine, for them to ignore it. There's no way he would have written that had I not been talking about that on the campaign trail. And when I decided to end my campaign, I had a private meeting with Donald Trump. I told Donald Trump what I told you about why I ran, and that I never criticized him, but I did want him to talk about those issues. And he put out a tweet and said that Larry Elder was a great American, and he's bringing to the forefront the issue of fatherlessness and the importance of family. So as far as I'm concerned, mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. Yeah, I love that. It's a great story, great answer. And it's just the truth. I mean, we go back to the beginning of the show, and that's the first thing you said that everybody should have let resonate. Just tell the truth. So I wanted to kind of follow up on my commitment to talk to you about Gavin Newsom and California, and I'm going to tie that in with your book, As Goes California. Congratulations. Now, I had you down for 18 books. So this is 19th book, or how far off am I?
Well, I have a bunch of books that are a collection of my essays. And then, of course, I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I've written a handful of books, including one about the 8-hour conversation I had with my dad, not having spoken to him for 10 years. It wasn't like he abandoned the family or anything. We just had a rocky relationship. I thought he was too harsh, too mean, spanked me too hard. So I sat down when I was 25 years old for what I thought would be a 5 or 10-minute conversation with the man. We ended up talking for 8 hours. That's when I found out that my last name, Elder, was not the name of my father's biological father. My father never met his biological father. As I mentioned, he was thrown out of the house by his irresponsible mom at the age of 13 years old, had a rough, tough life, joined the military, became a Marine. And when he got out of the Marine to get him a job as a cook, he was in charge of cooking for the colored soldiers. He went to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he married my mom to get him a job as a cook. And he was told by restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, we don't hire niggers. Goes to an unemployment office. The lady says, you went to the wrong door. My dad goes out to the hall and sees colored only, goes to that door to the very same lady who sent him out. My dad had been to LA when he was a Pullman porter on the trains right before the war. So he told my mom he's come back going out to LA to get him a job, because when my dad was out here right before the war, he noticed you could walk to the front door, Todd, of a restaurant and get served. And my dad made a mental note that maybe someday I'll move to LA, because he always had packages of crackers and tin cans of tuna, because you never knew in the South in those days if you'd be able to get a meal. So my dad goes from Chattanooga to LA to get him a job, and he goes around for half a day, and he's told, I'm sorry, you don't have any references. My dad said, I need references to make ham and eggs? So they treated him the same way in LA as they did in Chattanooga. He goes to an unemployment office. That's when he began to work those 2 full-time jobs cleaning toilets, one for Nabisco brand bread, another for another bread company called Barbara Ann Bread, and then saved his nickels and dimes and started the cafe. So that's what my dad did. I talk about that in my book. Can I say one more thing before we get into the book? One of the reasons I think, at least I like to think I'm so effective, is because I don't try to just talk about emotions and slogans, America's a great country, stuff like that, all of which are true, but I try to talk about facts, details, studies. 1997, Time Magazine and CNN teamed up to do a study of Black teenagers and white teenagers. This is 25 years ago. And both Black teenagers and white teenagers were asked whether or not racism was a major problem in America. And not too surprisingly, both of them said yes. But then they did this. They asked the Black teens, is racism a big problem, a small problem, or no problem in your own daily life? 89% of the Black teens call racism a small problem or no problem in my own daily life. In fact, twice as many Black teens than white teens said, and I'm quoting verbatim, failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism, end of quote. This is 1997. This is before the election and re-election of Barack Obama. So Black kids are telling you racism is not a big deal. It's all about hard work and accountability. Why then aren't Black kids working hard and being more accountable? Lack of fathers in the house. I saw a chart of how many hours a Black teenager spends in high school on homework versus white kids versus Asian American kids. It is night and day. Now, no Black kid is going to deny the connection between being able to shoot free throws and a three-point shot and being in the gym and putting in the hours. But for some reason, Black people don't see the connection between math and reading and computing and putting in the hours, because the old man is not in the house influencing you by word and by deed. That's what's going on in the Black community, and that is a far bigger problem, any kind of racism, than race hustlers like Joe Biden or Al Sharpton will put forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the household thing is obviously a passion of yours, and I'd love to hear that. And we can't deny that when the father's in the house, you have a mother and a father. You know, we kind of talk about the father not being there and the mother's always there, right? You got to have both of them to really turn the corner. But definitely the plight of that situation is bad in any household, and we don't want to underplay that at all.
Any household. And let's look at some of the more prominent so-called Black leaders, a term I'm not particularly happy about. Barack Obama. Barack Obama wrote his first book called Dreams from My Father about the angst that he experienced because his father was not in his life. His biological father he last saw when he was 10 years old, and talked about the pain that's inflicted. Al Sharpton had a nice middle class.
Hang on, Larry, I hate to cut you off because I want to make sure everyone understands. Now, the book's titled As Goes California. Let's just make sure it's now. I know that I stole I'm not cutting you off. I want to make sure everyone understands where you're going, because you are a freight train. Here's what's going on. This book is amazing. It's coming out tomorrow, and I want people to understand that I titled the name of this show The Black Face of White Supremacy because you talk about that in this book, correct?
That's correct. I talk about how the LA Times referred to me in a headline column, Todd. Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. Subheadline, you've been warned.
You've been warned.
Written by a woman named Erica D. Smith, who, by the way, when my race was over, I went back to talk radio to fill out my contract. And I invited her on my show to tell me and my listeners why Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. And guess who refused to come on the show? Erica D. Smith. Another columnist referred to my views as white supremacist views. So this is the kind of treatment that I got at the hands of the LA Times, a newspaper whose editor, the daughter of the editor, is a left-wing person that said some positive things about Hamas. This is the way I was treated by the left-wing media here in California. So the book talks a lot about the way I was treated during the race and about why I got into the race and about what would happen to the country if, God forbid, a guy like Gavin Newsom, who wants to become president, became president. This is a guy who signed a bill mandating that every publicly held corporation in California have at least one member of the LGBTQIA plus community on its board of directors. This is a guy who signed the bill setting up a panel for reparations. This is a guy who supported soft on crime laws, propositions like Proposition 57 that lowered a bunch of categories of crime from violent to non-violent. So now a non-violent crime in California, believe it or not, rape of an intoxicated victim in California is now a non-violent offense. Assault of a police officer is now a non-violent offense. Serial arson in California is now a non-violent offense.
I'm sorry, did you say rape is, what was the first one you said?
Rape of an intoxicated victim is now a non-violent offense in California. Serial arson.
How can that be?
Proposition 57 that people like Gavin Newsom proposed on the basis of criminal justice reform.
So we're going to blame this on Soros, and we're going to, why is, I don't even understand the logic behind that. What is there to gain from that, Larry? I want to.
There is a connection between George Soros and all of this.
But no, making rape easy. What is the logic? What is there to gain? I don't understand why.
The logic is that criminals in California are disproportionately people of color, and they are victimized by a racist society. So we should understand why they behave in crime. So they're really victims. They're not villains. They're victims. That's the whole thinking behind all these soft on crime George Soros DAs, and they're all over the place in New York, in Chicago, in San Francisco. That one, by the way, was recalled by the voters in Los Angeles. The idea is that people who are people of color are mistreated by our society and therefore should not be held accountable for the crimes they commit, even though the crimes are disproportionately committed against also people of color. So go figure.
You had him though. You had him on the run. I want to hear the conclusion of the idea of the book here, but I want you to understand you had him on the run. I mean, you were the way I understood it, because we're over here on the East Coast. We're like, come on, Larry, come on, Larry, come on, Larry. Why was there no Democrats running? I don't understand. Did you beat out Democrats in the primary? Was it a group primary?
Well, here's the deal. In 2003, we did have a Democrat governor who's recalled by Arnold Schwarzenegger. One of those on the replacement side, it's a two-step deal. Voters first have to vote 50% plus one to recall the governor. If the governor is recalled, whoever gets the most votes on the replacement side becomes governor. So when I ran, there was 46 people to replace him. I was one of 46. What happened in 2003, the tactical mistake Democrats made is that a Democrat lieutenant governor also was on the replacement side. So pulled a lot of votes away from the Democrat governor. And the first part they lost, which was the recall part. In this case, there was no prominent Democrat on the replacement side. So people thought that the former mayor of LA, two-term mayor, a Democrat named Antonio Villaraigosa, might run on the replacement side. He apparently was offered some sort of job if he didn't get into the race. So he didn't. So there were no prominent Democrats on the replacement side. So Gavin Newsom was able to retain his job. However, on the replacement side, I finished by far number one. I got 49% of all the replacement votes. The next highest person got 9%, and that was a Democrat. I got 3.5 million votes, more than virtually all the other 45 rivals combined. California has 58 counties. On the replacement side, I carried 57 of 58 counties. Now, the state GOP and the federal GOP did not endorse me, did not give me one dime. They both wanted the two-term mayor of San Diego to be the guy. I carried San Diego County by 30 points. I thought at some point during the recall election, given that the base wanted me, I was drawing Todd Trump-like crowds. I thought that if they didn't give me money, at least they give me verbal support. But Kevin McCarthy, I told the 12 or so House GOP members to stay out of the race. So only two publicly supported me. One named Michelle Steele, another one named Doug LaMalfa in the Sacramento area. Outside of that, the other House members, Republican House members in California, said nothing. Darrell Issa allowed me to take some pictures with him, but even he did not officially endorse me. So I got no money from the state GOP, no money from the federal GOP. I got outspent almost 10-1. In came Joe Biden, who said Larry Elder, quote, is the closest thing to a Donald Trump clone as I've ever seen. Obama cut a commercial for him. Kamala Harris did. Bernie Sanders did. Elizabeth Warren did. They all said the same thing. They didn't say Gavin Newsom is doing a great job for the people of California on COVID, the way he shut down the state, on schools, on the fact that people are leaving California for the first time. They said the same thing over and over again. Quote, stop Republican takeover, close quote. Yeah, because voters in California have been indoctrinated to believe no matter how bad things are, no matter how much a price of a home costs, 175%, by the way, above the national average, a Republican would be worse. And it worked.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were phenomenal. I thought that California was on the way back to some type of glory in some regards. And I think you would have been a phenomenal governor. And, more important, I'm going to shift here a little bit. I think you would have been a phenomenal president. So I want to understand a little bit. I know my wife would love to understand this. She thinks you're fabulous. I want to understand why you didn't get on the stage. Why is Chris Christie on the stage? And I'm not a hater of really anybody on that stage, but I don't understand why Chris Christie's up there and you're not up there. I don't understand. I mean, I had a lot of questions on even Mr. Pence in some regards towards a while there. So I had you, man. I had you, and then they didn't let you on the stage. What's up with that?
Well, Todd, this is a family show, so I want to use a verb that I can use. I got shafted by the RNC. Yeah. I met all their debate criteria. I had to have
40,000. You had it.
Check. 3 polls where I was at 1% or better. Check. As soon as the deadline was over, Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman of the GOP, calls me and says, Larry, one of the 3 polls you submitted cannot be used. Why? It's the Rasmussen poll, she said, and it is, quote, affiliated with Donald Trump. And to be sure, the rules say that any poll affiliated with any candidate cannot be used by that candidate or any other candidate. However, after she made the statement, Rasmussen put out a tweet and said, we are not affiliated with Donald Trump. There's no reason why Larry Elder can't use us as one of the 3 he needs. We then submitted a 4th but that was after the deadline to be sure. But that polling had conducted its polling before the deadline. So there was enough wiggle room that the RNC could have put me up there had they wanted. Now, my lawyer is the former chair of the Federal Elections Commission, and he says that by failing to apply the debate criteria fairly to Larry Elder, the RNC could be subjected to an FEC fine of up to $100 million. So I told the RNC on the day of the debate, if they didn't change their mind by 2:00 p.m., I was going to drop that complaint. They did not, so now we've dropped the complaint. So, Todd, think about it. If I can't get up there on the debate stage to talk about the epidemic of fatherlessness, the need for school choice, the lie that America is systemically racist, and by the way, a need for an amendment to the Constitution to fix spending to a certain percentage of the GDP. Otherwise, the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. If I can't get up there and do my thing, how in the world am I going to qualify for the second debate, let alone the third debate? So my candidacy basically was doomed from the very beginning by the RNC failing to be fair, in my opinion, to me and putting me up there on that debate stage.
So no one else used the Rasmussen?
No, other people were able to use other polls. But no one could use the Rasmussen poll. And again,
I mean, I get it.
Rasmussen is a respected poll. I mean, the RNC,
yeah.
if you go on the Twitter line, they use Rasmussen all the time. And Rasmussen in 2016 was one of the more accurate polls that predicted that Donald Trump was going to win the election. But now all of a sudden, because Elder wanted to use Rasmussen, I can't use it because it's
so let me ask the bigger question here then. If it was rigged, I'm not saying that I don't believe you. I'm just saying, assuming that the criteria has lent itself to the fact that it was botched, rigged BS, why wouldn't they want you? I mean, why wouldn't the RNC want you there next to Vivek? Why wouldn't they want you next to? Why would they want Christy blabbering on like that? Why wouldn't they put you right next to? Why wouldn't they showcase your skill set? Why I want to understand that.
I think two reasons. I think in their infinite wisdom, they wanted to have as few people up there in the debate stage as possible. I think they felt that 2016 was out of control with Donald Trump and 16 or 17 other people. So the idea that they could eliminate somebody else and put fewer people on the debate stage, I think appealed to them. But more importantly, I think that Larry Elder gives the RNC heartburn for all the reasons you and I have been talking about. I think that they're wimps when Democrats play the race card. I think they're wimps on spending. Government gets bigger and bigger, whether Ronald Reagan is in charge or Donald Trump is in charge, largely because these so-called entitlements are on an unsustainable path. Even Barack Obama and Bill Clinton refer to them as unsustainable, yet nothing gets done because we need an amendment to the Constitution, and nobody's talking about this, to tie the hands of Congress to limit spending to a certain fixed percentage of the GDP, with maybe exception for war and for natural disaster. And nobody's talking about this. So they have been a wimp on spending, a wimp on race, and a wimp on making the case for why we need school choice. And I think I give them heartburn.
Yeah. Well, don't change. You're a gift to so many people. I want to make sure we close. I'm super excited about this. Can you hold the book up real quick? Because I'm going to move on to the next questions.
I just happen to have a copy right here.
I know. I want one. All right.
Who knew?
Who knew? Look at you. You're just a beautiful man. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give away 20 of these books. Whoever comes in the comments, Abby, I know you're watching, Heather and the team, you guys are all watching. The first 20 comments, let's do 50. Let's do the first 50 books. Now you got the hardcover, right? We're spending some money right now. We spending some money. All right. The hard copy, right? You're going to ship them. Will you sign them for everybody?
I sure will. Give them to me. I'll take care of it.
Okay, so this is literally the first show to hear about this, the first show to talk about it. November 7th, this drops. Get on there. We're going to figure out, we'll get your names. We're going to send these to Larry. He's going to sign them, and it's going to be awesome, and we're going to take care of it. All right, so we're going to close that chapter. We good to go?
Good to go.
All right. Thank you so much. The next topic, I got a couple things I want to do in the last 20 minutes here. I wanted to... I want to do this. I'm feeling comfortable with you, and I want you to understand. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and obviously you're trying to clear the air for a lot of people in many regards. And again, I want to make sure everyone understands that I am not dispassionate. I'm not trying to be a wimp Okay, because you use that word. I'm the last thing I am is a damn wimp. I want you to know that, but I do want you to know that I am not, I can't be dispassionate. I know you're not a dispassionate black man. I think that we do need to be bold enough to face the truth. And so that's why we're here with Larry Elder this afternoon and having a great time. And what a privilege it is. I want to get brave a little bit. And I'm just going to tell you, I got some white people questions. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got permission from some of my black friends to ask these questions and this or that. I mean, but because I want to make sure that like we hear a lot out there, and I got to tell you, as a concerned white person, we don't know when to shut up. We don't know where to start. We don't know. We really don't know. That Ferguson effect you were talking about the other day, or just earlier in the show, was this. There was a stat I was studying you, and it was this statistic that police officers are less likely to draw on a black person than a white person.
That's right.
Right. And so, so think about what's going on here now. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get it out there. Here's my first question. You ready? White people questions. What is a victocrat? What is a victocrat? Did I say it right?
It's victocrat, VICTICRAT. It's a
white
word,
guy, right? Victocrat.
It's a word that Larry Elder invented. I get 10% if you use it, by the way.
I got to put a little R next to it. I didn't put a little R because wired differently. We have our own vernacular. We have 3 books, and every episode of the book we add a word. And I'm going to add this one to my next book, and I'm going to put you by it, and I'm going to put a little trade.
Right.
Yeah. All right, we got it. Victocrat.
It's a term I use, by the way. It's gender neutral. It's religious neutral. It's race neutral. It's ethnicity neutral. It's a term for anybody that complains that the world is conspiring against him or her to keep them down. Perpetual state of being aggrieved. A victocrat. People like Al Sharpton, professional victocrat. People like Jesse Jackson, professional victocrat, blaming everything on other people, as opposed to looking in the mirror and saying, what could I have done to change the outcome that my mother and my father taught us?
Candace Owen, there was a question you had that you just brought up Jesse Jackson, and I'm trying to find my notes here. What do you think about it wasn't Candace Owen. So you remember the interview you did? It was many, many years ago, and a man came up to you and said, what do you think about our Jesse Jackson for president? Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
All right. Give us the take on that. A black man came to you and said, what do you think about our Jesse Jackson for president?
By the way, Candace Owens wrote the foreword for the book, As Goes California.
Oh, great.
Wrote the foreword for her book called Blackout, and so she returned the favor for me. That happened many years ago. I belonged to a private club in Cleveland, and most of the wait staff were black. So I'm walking out of the door one time. One of the wait staff came up to me and said, this is 1984, 1988. Jackson ran in 84 and 88. So I don't remember which one it was, but I think it was 84. And he said, Mr. Elder, what do you think of the chances of our Jesse Jackson becoming president? Now, I don't think very much of Jesse Jackson at all. He is a race-hustling victocrat. He had a small, vigorous, positive role when he worked for MLK, but even MLK found him annoying and too aggressive. And he said, what do you think of the chances of our Jesse Jackson becoming president? Now, I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to offend this man who clearly, I thought, the way he phrased the question, had a lot of respect for Jesse Jackson. And so I said to him, I really don't think he's qualified. And much to my surprise, he said, Mr. Elder, neither do I. He's in the we shall overcome business. And you know what? We done.
I agree. All right. So that was a good we shall overcome, because it was this idea of going in the wrong place. And so that caught my eye, because I did do quite a bit of research. Okay. The next white question is, give me the difference between institutional racism, which I need some explanation on that, and systemic racism.
And then there's structural racism. I think they're all synonymous. The idea is that America hasn't changed any. America is still holding black people down, even though it's clearly not true. For example, even think tanks on the left, like the Brookings Institution, say the formula to escape poverty is pretty clear. Finish high school. Don't have a kid until you get married. Get married first. Get a job. Keep that job. Don't quit that job till you get another job. and avoid the criminal justice system. It is now easier for a black kid with a given SAT score and a given set of grades to get into the college or university of his or her choice than it is for a white kid. And now about 20-25% or so of white kids, according to a study I read, lie on their applications and say that they're black because they know it's easier to get into a college or university. If the first step towards escaping poverty is to get a good education, you could argue that in many instances, it is now easier for a black person to take that first step than a white person in similar circumstances.
And that's institutional?
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, you asked me about the cops being more hesitant. Let me tell you a little bit about that. There is an economist, a black economist at Harvard named Roland Fryer. He is the youngest tenured professor in the history of Harvard. And Harvard is the oldest college in America. That's how brilliant this guy is. And he's from the hood. He's from Baltimore. And he read about all these high-profile shootings, whether it's Freddie Gray or Michael Brown. And he just knew the cops were using deadly force against black people disproportionately just because they were black. They did a study to confirm it. He was shocked. He said they were the most shocking findings of my professional career. Not only were cops not using deadly force against black people just because they were black, they were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. Big front page article about all of this in July of 2016 in the New York Times. Also the same year, April 27, 2016, in USA Today, big long study about this going back over a decade where cops were giving a shoot or no, don't shoot drill. And they were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. In fact, more unarmed white people are killed every year than unarmed black people, but most people could not name an unarmed white person because the media couldn't care less. If an unarmed black person is killed, the police comes in there, the media comes in, it's a big story, unarmed white person get killed, nobody cares. And there are unarmed whites who get killed. There's a guy named Tony Timpa, T-I-M-P-A. Google him and go to YouTube. And longer than George Floyd, cops are laughing at him, holding him down. The guy is screaming, I'm hurting, I'm hurting, I'm hurting. And he died. Another guy named Kelly Thomas out here in California. I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Also very agonizing, many minutes on YouTube. And he died. And in one case, cops were not charged. Another case, cops were charged, were found not guilty. My point is, nobody knows their names. If they were black, they would be household names like Michael Brown or like Freddie Gray or like George Floyd. And by the way, the prosecutor who prosecuted the George Floyd case, remember it was televised, was black. Oh. And the lead prosecutor in his opening statement, and I was a trial lawyer when I practiced law, the most important part of a trial is your opening statement. He took pains to say the police in general were not on trial. In fact, he praised cops as having to make split life and death decisions in a split second. He said the Minneapolis PD was not on trial. He praised the Minneapolis PD and said he knew a number of their officers. He said this individual cop, Derek Chauvin, is on trial for what he did and for what he didn't do. He never even implied that Derek Chauvin was motivated by George Floyd's race, and Derek Chauvin was never tried with a hate crime. Yet we had 4 months worth of protests, some violent, in the streets of America from May of 2020. 25 people killed, 2,000 officers injured, $2 billion of insured property damage, maybe another $2 billion of uninsured property damage, all because of an assumption made by millions of people in the streets that what happened to George Floyd had to do with his race when there was zero evidence of it. However you feel about what Derek Chauvin did, zero evidence that what Derek Chauvin did had anything to do with George Floyd's race. So it's getting people killed, it's destroying property for no valid reason.
Yeah. So that's institutional racism, systemic racism. Pardon me?
They're all autonomous, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So and I'm having some fun with it, but yet I think it's important that we all kind of understand. So real quick, black privilege.
Can I make one more comment? There's a longtime professor of criminology at Florida State University. His name is Eric Stewart. Decades long of studies confirming the presence of institutional racism. Guess who just got fired for fabricating the findings of his studies? Eric Stewart. Now, if America is replete with institutional racism, why in the world would you have to fabricate your findings? And there's a book written by a guy named Wilfred Riley, R-E-I-L-L-Y. He's a professor at a historically black college. He documents over 500 fake hate crimes in the last several years, including, of course, Jussie Smollett, that were just completely untrue. Black people yelling and screaming about racism. They were complete fake hate crimes. Now, why in the world would you have to make up racism if America is systemically racist? And the answer is the demand for instances of racism is exceeding the supply, so they're making up a new supply.
All right, I understand. This is a serious topic, and I obviously I'm with my new friend Larry Elder, and I appreciate the conversation. One other one I had is revisionist history. Revisionist history. What is that term?
Well, that is the way that the left has improved the image of the Democratic Party by arguing that in the 60s, after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, the racists left the Republican Party, left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party. And here's the problem.
Oh, okay. All right, go ahead.
The Democratic Party is a party of slavery, the party of the Confederacy, the party of Jim Crow, the party whose president nominated the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court during the Dred Scott case, the party of the Southern Manifesto after Brown versus Board of Education was passed, striking down separate but equal.
Abraham Lincoln was a Republican.
Yeah, Lincoln was Republican. 19 Democrats and 2 Republicans signed what's called the Southern Manifesto, saying, I don't give a damn what the Supreme Court says. We're not going to integrate. It's a party that destroyed the nuclear family. It's a party that's opposed to school choice. So what do? You argue that all of a sudden the people that were racist left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party. Here's the problem. A greater percentage of Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act of 64 than did Democrats. A greater percentage of Republicans in the House and in the Senate voted for it than did Democrats, A and B. If you look at all of the Democrats that voted against the Civil Rights Act of 64 in the House and the Democrats, how many of them actually switched and joined the Republican Party? In the Senate, 1 guy, absolutely 1. And in the House, I think it was 1 guy. Outside of that, those racist Democrats that voted against the Civil Rights Act of 64 remained Democrats, including Al Gore Sr., who voted against the Civil Rights Act and participated in what was at the time the longest filibuster in the history of the Senate to prevent the bill from coming on the floor for a vote. So it's just not true. So the revisionist history is that all of the racists left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party so they could continue to practice their racism. It is nonsense.
Yeah, I did a show on slavery and the lie about reparations to the slave owners. I think you did some stuff on that as well. And I think there was another show you were actually talking to Candace about that and this idea of revisionist history in that regard. It is true that the government did pay the slave owners, but it wasn't because they were trying to be unfair or anything. They were just trying to find any way they could do to get this slavery thing stopped.
Well, the government in the UK paid people that were involved in the slave trade for the value of their quote unquote property, but we did not do that in America.
We did in one. I thought we did it in one particular area in the DC area.
Not to my knowledge. They lost their quote unquote property. The revisionist history is this: if you saw that program called Roots in the 70s, Cooper Kente was going down the jungle, and a white man led a group of black people to entrap him and to sell him into slavery. That's not how it went down. Blacks raided other blacks, conquered them, and sold them to European and Arab slavers. So when you hear that reparations are deserved because black people were quote unquote kidnapped, they weren't kidnapped. They were captured in war and sold to European and Arab slavers. In fact, more blacks remained in Africa in servitude for other blacks that were taken out by European and by Arab slavers. And by the way, the Arab slave trade preceded the European slave trade by centuries and went on longer than did the European slave trade, which ended. So if we're going to do this reparation stuff, we should get reparations primarily from the Democrat Party, because in 1860, there were about 400,000 slave owners. All but a handful of them were Democrats. So if we're going to do reparation, we should only be getting them from the Democratic Party, A, and B. Do we then go to Africa and get reparations from countries like Ghana and Kenya that were hotbeds of slavery, and then go to the Middle East and get reparations from countries that were involved in the slave trade? Unfortunately, slavery was part of human history. Asians enslaved Asians, whites enslaved whites, blacks enslaved blacks. It's been an ugly part of all of human history. And it was the West that decided that it was morally repulsive and ultimately ended slavery. And as you know, we had a civil
Ended
war.
slavery.
Hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives in order for slavery to be ended in America.
Yeah, at any cost, we vowed to end the slavery.
Right.
And so I think that's a good closing note. Here is the rundown, the speed. Here we go. I got the presidential candidates right now, and I want your quick burst on this. We're going to take this show out. One sentence on Nikki Haley. One sentence. Here we go.
Well, Todd, let me just
Go.
object to the game. Any one of these people, with the exception of Chris Christie, would be better than having another 4 years of Biden Harris.
All right.
Donald Trump's going to be our nominee. He did great on the borders. He did great on the economy. He did great on energy independence. He did great on judges. What's not to like? Here's what I tell people who don't like Donald Trump. I'm not a golfer, but I love the sport. I know you're an athlete, Todd. And one time I'm watching the Golf Channel, and a woman is talking to these two professional golfers. She said, "What makes a good golfer?" And one of them went through this long, detailed, beautiful, mechanical description of what makes a good golfer, where he puts his hands, how he positions his feet, how he looks at the ball when he swings, how his hips go. And the other one said, "I look to see where the ball lands." Well, let's not pay attention to Donald Trump's swing. I know Donald Trump is abrasive. I know he has sharp elbows. I know he's made fun of people in ways that I often think are kind of silly. But I consider that to be white noise, pardon the expression. I don't look at his swing. I look where the ball lands. And it landed exactly where I want on school choice, exactly where I want on borders, exactly where I want on the economy, on inflation, on energy independence. And if he gets 4 more years, we can get back to that.
I think that's a great way to take this out. I want to just tell you, Larry Elder, you are remarkable. And I want all my listeners out there to do it. The most endearing thing about Larry Elder is that he is authentic. Like the word authentic. I want to get the book. I'm going to take this baby out. I want you to get his book, Larry Elder, As Goes California. Buy the book. And remember, Larry, 50 of you guys are getting signed books. Come on now. Who's going to do that for you? I'm going to do it. It's all like Donkey Kong, wired differently here. But I want you to understand this man is authentic. This man is not dispassionate for his race. He's not dispassionate about the plight of people that are hurting and suffering. He's just honest, and he wants to get us to see the way that it's going to work, right? We can't just turn our backs on the idea that culture is culture and we need to go forward and we need to look at things truthfully if we're going to solve a problem. So I want to thank Larry Elder. I want to thank all of you for following us. This has been a great interview, and what a privilege. Larry, God bless you and everything that you're doing for America and everything that's going on in your life. Final word.
Todd, we've got a country to save. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. God bless.
God bless all of you. I'll see you soon, Larry. Thank you, Dr. Ruth.